Well, before I start, I just wanted to say thank you all so much for taking the time to be here, and I'm really excited about presenting. So, about me, offensive security engineer, bachelor's degree in computer systems. I've had the opportunity to present at other events besides Cambridge. I was recently at LeHack and Hackaloo, so just good stuff. And then boring alphabet soup. Fun fact about me, favorite video game is Zombies Ate My Neighbors. I'm just kind of showing my age here, but if y'all definitely have the time, check it out. It's kind of an old one, but a goodie one. Okay, so what are we doing here? We're going to talk about what a SIEM does and how could attackers weaponize it, but not just the information that it shows or that it displays, but its core components and so much of its inherent functionality and how the attackers could take that to their advantage. The secret to a secure SIEM. STDs. So, I know what this sounds like, but I also know y'all are going to walk out of here and y'all are going to remember this. So, skill set, tools, and data. For skill sets, we want somebody who is able to understand the kind of telemetry and the kind of information that is being presented. And what is it trying to tell you? For tools, we want somebody that is also able to keep in mind that your tool is just, your SIEM is just one additional tool out of your security stack. For data, that's your telemetry and the logs that you're gathering from each different endpoint. So, quick glimpse to the basics. We're really not going to reinvent the wheel. We're just going to talk a little bit about what your SIEM does. So, this is a comprehensive solution that gathers information from several different endpoints from an IT organization. And once we have this telemetry, it is able to perform threat detection, alert, data correlation, real-time analysis, and reporting. And the beauty of it is that it lets you customize the way you want to present information, whether it's just like regular reports, charts, dashboards. So think of it as a group chat of your IT organization, per se, when it comes to your IT devices. When detection becomes direction, what does this actually mean? So this is all the way, like the different ways that an attacker could weaponize a SIEM's functionality. Disable detections, whitelisting persistence. For example, if there is an IOC that is obviously associated with malicious activity, or if you're getting third-party threat intel feeds, an attacker would basically be able to just like cut this type of communication, like, nope, this ain't happening anymore. Or overly broad rule creation. Starting creating like a whole bunch of rules or events or alerts that don't really bring anything positive or useful into your environment. Why? Because this is just going to make the analysts waste time. Okay, what is this? Well, why am I looking at it on my dashboard? And while the analysts are trying to figure out what's going on, the detection engineers are like, okay, how did my correlation rule, like broke? Or why are we being flooded with this amount of information? Then alert fatigue to hide real-time attacks. So it's basically the same concept, just like distracting the security operations center or distracting the blue teamers while they are performing malicious actions. It is also like a perfect situation, and this is like a discussion that I had with another red teamer. He's been doing red team for just like since the beginning of time. And I remember him telling me, why would they want to target a SIEM? It's a security tool. Like, why wouldn't they? Just like the amount of information that it's holding. And I'm talking like usernames and host names and naming conventions. So it's really good for, like gathering a picture of what your assets look like within an organization. Then identifying coverage, looking for potential blind spots. A lot of organizations don't really get, this is just a very random example, they don't really get a lot of visibility when it comes to their APIs activities or cloud instances that they manage. So an attacker accessing a SIEM would be able to see, hey, I'm not getting any visibility. These people are not getting visibility with their cloud instances or API activity. This is good for me to just have a better understanding of a potential target. Then understanding thresholds. Thinking, for example, win event log 4625. That's an account has been logged. I really hope that's what it is because it's been a hot minute since I messed with win event logs. So if an account has been disabled, not disabled, but it has been pretty much authentication has failed with event 4625, they're going to be like, okay, how many 4625 events or failed authentication does it take for me to get, an account has been locked? So 4740, I believe, locked account. So that way they're mapping coverage and they're also getting a better understanding of internal policies. How does it even work? How does your SIEM actually work? Well, whenever we think of visibility, typically we think of dashboards, right? And that was me as a security analyst. But what really happens under the hood? How does this information get into the dashboards? Through agents, for example. So these are going to be like the application that is in charge of gathering telemetry, and they're going to be working in combination with the collectors, which are going to be routing and forwarding and compressing this information throughout the whole environment. Then there's normalization and enrichment. So think of normalization as standardizing field format, just pretty much throughout the information that is being ingested. For enrichment, this is mapping and giving context to the telemetry. For example, mapping an IP address to a host name. Then correlation and storage. Based on the data that we're gathering, we're going to try to see patterns. What looks normal and what doesn't. And then there's whenever the data is presented in the analyst console. Well, just like whenever there's a security event, there is a chain of custody. Same thing happens in your SIEM. We're not going to go through each one of this because it's probably going to take me an eternity. But let's just think, for example, the most basic one, access, SSO, and automation sources. What happens whenever an account gets compromised? And if it's a higher privilege account? Yeah, so basically, there is a big possibility that every single instance that requires log ingestion, since you already have a privileged account, this could be manipulated by attackers. Collectors and forwarders. We already know that collectors and forwarders are just basically going to be distributing telemetry towards the environment. What happens whenever an attacker gets, to target an endpoint and they pretty much are able to contaminate these logs, or they're able to reroute them to an instance that they have control over? Then there's parsing, normalization, and enrichment. And this is a perfect example of how not all threats stem from malicious activity. Here's an example. An analyst that is trying to parse a regex in order to extract data and present it on, like a SIEM dashboard. What happens whenever you're parsing your regex incorrectly and you're providing inaccurate information, or you're missing an octet in your IP address? So that's why context is important. And then correlation, detection, and content. So whenever an attacker accesses a SIEM instance, they could just basically start suppressing alerts, creating extra ones, just like flooding the environment with a whole bunch of necessary things. Weaponization in action. So this is the attacker kill chain. How do they actually, or what actually happens whenever they're able to access an instance? Initial access through web UI. Then there's privilege escalation. Typical, you just don't really start as a super user. Disabling alerts, just kind of to cover your tracks. Log analysis for intel gathering. What good things can I get out of this information that I have? And if I'm able to just forward them for later reuse or, later analysis, even better. Okay, but how do they actually get in And this is the saddest part of this whole entire, publicly exposed SIEM implementation. I initially thought this was just silly me. Who would actually leave their SIEM out in the open? Oh gosh. Default aware credentials. So a lot of people don't really just think of password, like password protection or like password complexity. Vulnerable SIEM version. This happened earlier in the year, for example, Wazoo. And I feel like they've really been a target for this type of CVEs. Exposed underlying dependencies. This is one of my favorites, and we'll see why in a little bit. And then exposed APIs, just allowing anonymous API calls or just out there exposed. This is just for Wazoo, and this is just what you see in Shodan. And this is just in Shodan. But there's, pick your flavor. There's also Splunk, there's also Sniper, there's also XIM, it's out there. If it's there, it's out there. Initial access through Web UI. So, in many exposed Wazoo deployments, access might be possible due to either default credentials, publicly documented vulnerabilities, and this is including unknown, unauthenticated remote code execution. Then there's through dependencies. This is probably the most painful part to talk about. So that's me. I get triggered with my own presentations. So whenever I was doing my research, I noticed that there was an exposed Redis implementation. So, remote dictionary server. This is an open source in-memory NoSQL key value store that is used as an application cached, just to quickly respond as a database. Everything is going to be associated from one key to one value, and it's all executed in memory. Well, this allows remote code execution, and it was a supporting service for a Wazoo instance, and it's out there in the open. Then there was also a BOA server. It's discontinued and no longer maintained. And it was there as a supporting service for a SIEM instance. Then there's initial access through APIs. So APIs are typically used because they are easy to make things a little bit easier for administrators to just maintain and just basically check. But here's what happens. This kind of increases the risk of unauthenticated access, manipulating configurations, and abusing endpoints. Why? Because it's going to give us a really good visibility of what versions are you running, the name of your, your usernames, the level of privileges. But how do they actually gather API keys? They target a code base, and then they start running tools just such as Trufflehug, and this type of tools work based on entropy. So just analyzing the code base and based on surrounding context of basically the repo. So, okay, these keys are an amount of characters long, and it's typically starts with this type of characters. So once they actually have this contextual information, they're able to evaluate findings and see how they can further reuse it. Okay, so attacker breaks in. What can they actually do after that? Just kind of a little disclaimer. I typically use a fake beauty brand, my version of AdventureWorks, Contoso or whatever. So you're going to see a lot of blush looks as a domain name. Beauty brands get targeted pretty often, but that's a story for a different presentation. So what can we gather from this? What can we gather from a SIEM? IP ranges, even if it's internal, it gives us a good idea of how to map our network. Domain and host names, naming conventions, which come in pretty handy. We're really going to be spoofing logs. Type of detections, to map coverage and misconfiguration. So systems that are either end of life or no longer supported or just vulnerable to an exploit, those are perfect for it. Then account names, just anybody that is an enterprise admin, domain admin, or a higher privilege level. Here's an example. In this log, just like instance, we are able to see a service account, and we can also visualize a misconfiguration in here. Personally, don't believe that it would be a good plan to give a service account RDP access. So it also kind of paints a picture of the security mindset that an organization has. We can also get to see actual components of a SIEM, like the versions that are running. And in this case, we're running FileBit just like for us to ship our logs, and we get to see the version. What happens if there's a vulnerability associated to this version? Then, as I mentioned before, this is for APIs if we want to enumerate users and the type of access that they have. What other fun stuff can we do if we break into a SIEM? Well, we can actually start creating rogue users just for us to keep coming back in. These are local users for a SIEM. But the beauty of it is that a lot of SIEM instances actually have internal authentication panels for bind accounts. So nothing tells me that an attacker or any just random person could try to intercept these passwords and then get like a hash version of it and then try to crack it or pass it or just make use of what they have. And how do they gather this type of credentials? Through the SIEM UI, internal consoles, external value vaults or key stores, like our logs might make reference to, hey, somebody's using a privileged account management solution, or hey, you have a bucket in here. Or exported backups or configuration files, or sometimes within the actual SIEM logs, they show you passwords. Here's an example, and this is something that I've seen in production in the past at a prior job. People just storing their passwords in environmental variables, and then an alert comes in, and then it's out there in plain text. So, same thing whenever you have hard-coded credentials. This is 4104 script log logging in PowerShell. What happens if you're running like a script with a hard-coded set of credentials? This is why I say it's important to sanitize your logs at source. So if you have no actual reason to be running a hard-coded password in there, just don't do it simply. Or try to use safe logging functions or regex. In the pipeline, apply filters in FileBit or whatever log shipper you're using. Just make sure you're selecting what you're actually using or what you're actually going to need. After ingestion, sanitize again on presentation. Just make sure you're parsing or extracting the sections that are going to give you exactly the context that you want to see. Restrict raw log access to forensics team. I mean, if there's no real reason for somebody to be looking at these logs, just don't show it to them. And then, just really quick, because I'm pretty sure I'm getting close to the end time. It is also possible to perform LDAP abuse through compromised services. So once we have a set of credentials, we are able to perform LDAP queries. Actually, all of the single authentication modules for your SIEM could be abused. I'm just going to focus on LDAP and just briefly mention it really quick. Making sure you have readable credential material and that you have a service account used for LDAP enrichment. Yeah, and that your host can reach other LDAP servers. Otherwise, you're really not going to be able to perform the query. I know it sounds like a hypothetical scenario, but hey, we're talking about exposed SIEM instances. So that's already a very beginning of bad configuration. Weak monitoring, but the way I see it, once you're in, it's just easy for you to start like wiping any traces that you were already there. So attack kill chain. We mentioned initial foothold discovery and extraction. So once they actually have a set of credentials, they use validated credentials and tokens to access SPN. So somebody could attempt to curve a roast and then basically extract a ticket. Or persistence, create service credentials to maintain access. So it's going to make it easier for them to keep coming back. There's also my favorite, log injection. Start creating a whole bunch of alerts to start scaring the security team. So we're going to go through this pretty quick. And this is in Wasu. Based on the information that I enumerated, because I already know my domain, my IP ranges, my naming convention for workstations, I already know the service accounts that are being used, and I already know the type of techniques. So nothing tells me that an attacker isn't going to be able to spoof logs and try to fool the analyst and see, hey, is this a real event or not? So here I'm creating a whole bunch of requests, and I'm going to try to see if I can execute them. Okay, they went through just fine, or that's what I think. Okay, so we can see how they were generated, and then we're gonna see how our dashboards starts lighting up like a Christmas tree right now in a second. There it is. Crazy amount of alerts. And this is just from how we would see it in an externally exposed SIEM instance. And then existing vulnerabilities allow us to gather elevated privilege exploiting deserialization. This is similar to what happened with Mirai botnet earlier this year. Different layers that actually work. We're about to wrap up in a second. Preventative. Network segmentation. If there's no real reason to have your SIEM exposed to the public, people say, oh, okay, your MSSP needs access to it. It's like, no, try to find a way to VPN. Application whitelisting, operating system hardening, and also make sure that MFA is at least enabled. It's not foolproof, but it's going to give you that extra layer of security. Have additional detection and prevention controls. File integrity monitoring in case any sensitive files get modified. Out of an alerting, if your SIEM goes belly up, make sure that you have additional tools to rely on, your XDR, your NDR, that you still have an immutable log source that you can refer to. Restorative, disaster recovery, or refer to your security policy and make sure that it's something that it gets reviewed, like within a reasonable amount of time. Secure log replication and business continuity hooks, like stay up to date for alerts or updates, CVEs, stay in good communication with your vendor, and change management. Change management is important as well. Final thoughts. Your SIEM is not a crockpot. You cannot just set it and forget it. And it's the same thing with every single security solution, especially your SIEM. Think of your SIEM as your mirror. Like, it's not going to predict your future. It's just a crystal ball, or it's not a crystal ball. It's a reflection of what's already happening in your IT environment. Logs are not Pokemon. You don't have to catch them all. I know that it's pricey, but it's definitely worth it. And then something that I say in every single presentation, and those who have seen it before, tired of hearing me say it, security is like skincare. Security tools are like skincare for 3 reasons. As we get older, the stuff that we need changes. Just because something works for your best friend or for another organization doesn't mean that it's going to work for you. And then there isn't like a one-size-fits-all or like a miracle solution. It's typically a layered approach. And that's it.
Thank you, Melina. Thanks a lot. Q&A session. Anyone? Yes, here.
Thanks for the talk. Question about AI. More and more products integrate AI, SIEM products as well. Have you any experience with attackers like try to bypass or do like an inject, like try to force a log which says like please ignore the next 1,000 alerts, and so this won't get alerted in a SIEM?
I've actually seen AI plugin integration in security solutions. I'm not going to name the vendor, and I don't want to say that I was disappointed, but I was expecting a little bit more. I've seen AI suggestions giving really generic recommendations like isolate the infected endpoint and just like verify that no other user has access to this file And then just like the suggestions that are being provided by this solution were extremely generic. I've personally not seen any attackers trying to bypass or modify any AI modules, but I've actually seen instances of attackers just generating multiple alerts. But when it comes to AI integration with security tools, the ones that I've personally seen, I've expected a lot more.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Anybody else? You keep your comments or question for the lunch, I guess. Thank you, Melina. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you all.